Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Heisman Talk, your number one source of college football news on YouTube. I'm joined now by my co-host, Devonair D. Jackson, to discuss the most relevant topics for this season. D, how are you doing?
What's going on, Nate? I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. So today, we are finally jumping into the 2021 preseason rankings. Our first conference being the SEC. And D, these next few weeks before the season start are just going to get us more and more hyped up. We've got a lot to discuss, so we might as well jump right into it. Our first topic, like I said, is the SEC conference. And D, this might be one of the last years we talk about this conference without Texas and Oklahoma. We'll start off with our number one overall team. D, who is your first ranked team in the SEC this year?
My number one team is the University of Georgia. If not this year, then what year? They have, basically everything that you would need as far as, on offense with JT Daniels having a full off season, and being an experienced quarterback and having an offensive coordinator and Todd Monken and, having weapons like Arik Gilbert and Darnell Washington and, Don Blaylock and other, guys that are, coming back, possibly like George Pickens. You really have, a mixture of a lot of guys offensively. And then, defensively, you have a defensive line that can really get after the quarterback. When you talk about guys like Jalen Carter and, Jordan Davis and, Adam Anderson, you have a lot of guys that can really get after it. So, this is really, this should be, the year that, UGA has, that opportunity, that chance and takes that leap because, they do actually have the pieces, to compete and to, get over the hill.
Yeah, and D, there's a lot of people out there agreeing with you, but I'm going to have to disagree with you. I'm going to go with the defending champs, the Alabama Crimson Tide. And D, I know that a lot of things have to fall right into place for Alabama this year, but D, all we have to say is one name, and that's Nick Saban. As long as Nick Saban is there, they're going to be competing every single year for a title. And, one of the biggest key questions is who is Bryce Young going to be this year? Is he going to be the dual threat quarterback that everyone expects him to be? Maybe similar to Tua or Blake Sims from a few years ago. We don't know, but one thing that we do know is that Nick Saban is always able to work his offense around the quarterback. They will be without Najee Harris as well, which played a key factor in last year's team. And most importantly, they're without their old OC, Steve Sarkisian, who went on to be the head coach at Texas, and we'll talk about him next week in our video about the Big 12. But D, they still bring in a coach like Bill O'Brien, who has veteran experience with quarterbacks, and you have to wonder, could this be yet again another Alabama offense that just racks it up in receiving yards? That seems to be the trend lately. We shall see. But I think defensively, they're still strong. They return a lot of starters. They'll have to make up for, a few key secondary losses. But I think overall, the Crimson Tide will be ready to roll, as they say, come this fall.
Yeah, man, we'll have to see. I'm going to talk about them here shortly, so we'll have to see.
And I guess we can go ahead and move on to your second pick, D. Go right ahead.
Yeah, man. My second pick was your first pick. I'm choosing Alabama as my second pick, and it was kind of for some of the things that you mentioned. They lost a few guys on that defensive side of the ball, and Dylan Moses and Christian Barrymore on the defensive line. They lost Patrick Surtain in the secondary. So, and they lost a big key in their offense last year, and Steve Sarkisian, like you said. And so with all that and having also a new quarterback coming in Bryce Young, and I think he's going to be super talented and very dynamic. But he could also have a year like Spencer Rattler had last year, and everybody thought he was going to be dynamic and special. But you never know how it's going to be with having a new guy coming in and kind of changing up the offense a little bit. We know that Bill O'Brien is established, but how does he fit in the college level as far as at Alabama? He coached at Penn State, but how does he fit in the SEC? So, but they do have a lot of positives there. Bryce Young is a positive. Defensively, they're positive, and Will Anderson, the, defensive end / linebacker. He's a dynamic pass rusher. They have a transfer in Henry To'o from Tennessee, who's exceptionally talented. They obviously always bring in, 5 stars that can, really, really play. So, we'll have to see how it goes. But for right now, they're going to be my number 2 team.
Yeah, indeed. Just to add real quick, we saw such a great relationship between Nick Saban and Steve Sarkisian. The trust that they had with each other was inevitable. Nick Saban was obviously out with COVID that one game, and Steve Sarkisian stepped up to the plate. No problem, no questions asked. And you could really tell that the game plan was really trusted. It'll be interesting to see how that is with Bill O'Brien. We saw Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban have a lot of on-field and off-field issues and their trust and the way they game manage. So Bill O'Brien being a previous head coach in the NFL, let's see how it gels this year.
Yeah, I definitely want to see how that gels. And it'll be an interesting thing to see and a thing to follow throughout the year. So,
absolutely, indeed. Moving right along to my number 2 team, who was your number 1 team, that is the Georgia Bulldogs. Indeed, there's a lot of hype around them this year, led by quarterback JT Daniels. We didn't get to see much of him last year, especially in some of the key games against Bama and Florida that Georgia lost. So to have JT at the realm for the whole season under Todd Monken's offense, who, by the way, couldn't even implement his whole system under COVID regulations during the spring and summer. So to have those full practices, they're right up there at the top with Bama, in my opinion. And you want to talk about one of the strongest tight end cores in the nation with Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington, and then they add Arik Gilbert, who can play tight end or out in the wide receiver spot. Let me just mention, 2 of their tight ends are over 6'7", and Brock Bowers is not short either. He's a whopping 6'4". So, we saw a lot of the wide receiver core last year. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to work the tight end game more this year. They have a lot of dynamic guys like they did a few years ago with Isaac Nada, where they could really implement the pass game. So, you add that to an already very strong wide receiver core with a lot of young talent, a lot of speed, and then also the running back core. My biggest question is going to be the offensive line. Now, we've recently heard that Warren Erickson, the starting center for this year, is going to be out for a few months or a few weeks. We don't know the severity of the injury, but he's likely not to be starting against Clemson. And that's a big position to be in, especially in an environment that not many college teams are used to with COVID, with a lot of these young guys being in such a loud atmosphere with the offensive line being in sync. It'll be interesting to see how Georgia fares this year. I think, like you said, defensively, they're stacked. They'll be fine with Nakobe Dean at linebacker and a few defensive stars like Jordan Davis and many others. They're ready to go. But the key for me and why I put them at number 2 is the question mark at offensive line.
Definitely, man. Definitely true. There's definitely question marks at that offensive line. And there's definitely question marks at DB. They brought in a few guys, transfers, one from West Virginia, one from Clemson. So, we'll see how that the DBs look. But they do have concerns. They do have question marks. But I do think they'll be the number 1 team.
We shall see, D. We shall see. So moving right along, D, give us your number 3 team in the SEC.
My number 3 team in the SEC is Texas A&M. Really, really talented team. Obviously, their quarterback graduated this past year. It's going to be kind of tough, trying to see who will step in, Zach Calzada or Haynes King at quarterback. But the real reason I chose them is because their defense, man, they have a really, really talented defense. And, I really think that, defense linemen like DeMarvin Leal and, McKinley Jackson will be able to really, really get after the passer and be able to stuff up the run. And so, that's huge whenever you're talking about SEC play, having that defensive line that's stout like that. And so that's the real reason I chose them at number 3. I was going to go Florida, but, I just think that, they lost a lot, a little bit too much. And so I think that Texas A&M will be able to overcome more than Florida will be able to.
Yeah, indeed, that's a great pick. And just to add, their running back CJ Spiller is going to take the bulk on this offense this year. It'll be very intriguing to see, how their passing game is. They're going to really have to rely on him for a lot of carries this year. But he is one of the best backs in the nation. So, be ready for him to step up to the plate. Also, with Kellen Mond's departure, he was a decent quarterback, but he was nothing special in my opinion. So I'm hoping to see a revived Texas A&M offense with a quarterback who's a little bit more confident and maybe a little more agile, more like a Johnny Manziel. So yeah, D, that's a great pick. I'm going to stick in the West with another team, and this is my surprise number 3 pick. That is the LSU Tigers. That's right. I said it. And D, the main reason is because they're returning 22 of their 24 starters from last year. Now, they obviously went through a lot of coaching changes again this offseason. They bring in a whole new offensive coordinator who, by the way, remember the name, Jake Peets, offensive coordinator, new offensive coordinator who comes over from the Carolina Panthers as a quarterback coach under none other than Joe Brady, who led the LSU Tigers to a national title 2 years ago. And then another name to remember is Durante Jones, new defensive coordinator, who comes over from the Minnesota Vikings as a DB coach. And the reason I say that is because LSU's defense did not look like LSU's defense in the past last year. They were depleted. They looked tired. They looked fatigued. Look for LSU's defense to have a strong year. Now, on the offensive side, they do lose Miles Brennan to an unfortunate ankle injury, who's going to be out for several months. But look to Max Johnson, sophomore quarterback, to have a huge year this year. I mean, we saw this kid step up last year against Florida and win in a very tough battle towards the end. So we know he can play in key games. The question is, can they get back to the LSU we knew 2 years ago? This is their year to do it, dude.
Yeah, man. That's gonna be a good game, man. LSU and LSU's a good team. They always have a lot of talent. They have 2 of the best cornerbacks in the nation. That tandem with Derek Stingley Jr. and Elias Ricks is, man, that's like, you have, NFL secondaries or NFL corners and DBs that aren't even that good, in my opinion. So, I think that that's a good pick. And I'm a fan of Max Johnson, but I do think Texas A&M will take him out.
We shall see again. But I have one last question for you. And, this is relevant to the playoff and the possibility of a playoff expansion. But with just 4 teams this year in the playoff and this strong of a core in the SEC with all these teams, is this the year that the SEC gets 2 teams in the playoff?
Yeah, I think so. I think I definitely think you can see 2 teams like Alabama and UGA get in, kind of like in, I think, what was it, 2018, when they both got in. I can definitely see a scenario like that to where the loser of the SEC championship still gets in. Both of those teams are very, very talented, and having that full off season this year, and having with Georgia having a experienced quarterback, and Alabama just being Alabama with Nick Saban, obviously it's like they don't miss the playoffs. So I can definitely see that happening this year.
Yeah, and I would agree, and maybe watch out for a team like A&M who could sneak up. If they can beat Bama, they get to play Bama at home this year. So we'll update you on that later. We'll get into the season schedule coming up. Well, D, that's a wrap for today. When we come back next time, we'll discuss our top 3 teams in the Big Ten Conference. So get ready. Football is right around the corner. Until then, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Give this video a big thumbs up and get ready. As always, this is Nate Dogg and D signing off.